All right. Thanks, Vishal. And first of all, thanks to you and to the PM School community for giving me this chance to share my learnings and failures with this group here. So just before we get started, I just a couple of minutes. I'll just share why this topic. So I've been talking to a lot of product managers in the place where I work, as well as places I worked in the past, and in general, other people who've reached out to me for coaching, mentorship discussions. And one of the questions which has come up multiple times is, how do I make a decision on where do I take my career from here? So I'm talking about people who might already be in product management career, but have basically gotten started with or have done initial 2, 3, 4 years of product management experience. So I thought it would be a great idea to share how I have looked at career growth myself and what has been my journey. So before I get started, very clear disclaimer, this is not a recommendation for you folks to follow. This is my path, my journey, which I'm sharing with you. Let's critique towards the end. Let's discuss if it was right, if it was wrong. And then, so do not accept it as authority, because accepting authority is denial of intelligence. So I'm hoping all of you will feel free, ask me questions at any time, stop me, and just straight away start talking. I will not be looking at chat, but someone from the PM school would actually also help ask if there's any relevant question being asked at any time. With that, let me get started. All right. So career growth lessons from product growth. What today's presentation is going to be about. I'm going to share with all of you briefly my own journey, especially into product management. Then talk about lessons I have learned about product management and career growth in general. And then the third phase of this would be, hopefully, we'll have very engaging discussions where we can share learnings from this group, and we can talk about what made sense, what you felt was relevant, and and if you have questions on anything which I talk about. Cool. So before I get started on career growth, I thought I'll talk about how I became a PM. And my journey essentially started with, this was one of the startups on which I was working on. Essentially, I had just exited my first startup. I came to Bangalore. I worked with a small Series A funded startup where Kushal and I had an overlap. And then I started up again. And when I did that, I essentially hired a small team of developers, designers, and a small one-room office. And we got started. We built the app. We went through the entire journey. Didn't really pan out the way I wanted it to. So after an year and a half, I kind of thought maybe it's time that I look for some kind of an exit, because it's really not going to its logical conclusion, what I had imagined. And just learning from my first startup experience, I just reached out to a few people or startups where I thought there was a good fit. And then we were able to sell off the product to Jugnu. And at that point, Jugnu was based in North India in Chandigarh, and we were in Bangalore. Me and my team, we decided that we'll stay here in Bangalore. And that's the time when I was looking for, okay, so what do I do next? Reached out to a lot of founders in my network and otherwise. And essentially one thing led to another, got into conversation with Quikr. Pranay Chule, the founder, was an ex-IIT alum. Talked to him, he offered a product role, and I thought, why not? And that's how my journey started. And this was 2000, early 2015. So I might be wrong with the timeline exactly, but it was 2015. And around that time, there was another product where I was involved with. How do I even got to know about tech? Was I got involved in an open source project where I kind of created some noise around, hey, let's create something which was more like a book exchange platform. And I was able to get some really good developers chipping in on a open source project like this. And it was so much fun. And that's how my first kind of engagement with tech started, and then followed by my startup is where I, as a founder, essentially also taking up the role of the product manager. So that's the short journey or the story of how I became a PM. It wasn't intentional. I never knew if I wanted to be a product manager. I had never imagined. I had never met anyone who was a product manager. So that's what essentially how I became a PM. Now, I will still talk about my career growth since that point in time when I became a PM. But I want to briefly talk about how we've looked at product growth. Now, in my journey across Quikr, Gojek, where I saw some 20x growth in our transactions across multiple geographies and business units. And more recently, last 1 year at Razorpay, we've been trying to help our payments, banking, and lending businesses to grow. In general, I have observed very clearly every product goes through a phase where they have a start phase where you're looking for a product market fit. Then you have a growth phase. Then you come to a scale phase where you're really looking at being a number one or number two player in your industry or in your sector. And then there's a mature phase. A lot of companies continue to have multiple of these S curves by continuing to innovate and not having like this trajectory for their company overall. But definitely you will see this for products. You just pick up Facebook, you'll see that the Facebook product is probably somewhere high on the mature side of this scale, but a lot of other products might be at a different stage in this journey of a product and its growth. Now, what I really found interesting, given that I was associated with product growth I'm still associated with it across 3 different companies and 3 different stages. I found a lot of similarity and a simplification by putting it into a framework, which I thought would help me talk about how I look at my career. And this is a retrospective, looking back kind of a figure, a framework which I'm trying to fit. And I'll share with you how I look at it now, my journey. And that is what I'll be sharing in more detail with you. So I talked about my first startup, then my second startup where I essentially came into tech. And then I moved to Quikr. That was my first product management experience. And I really look at Quikr as my experience where I started into product management. And then Gojek is the experience which was my career's growth trajectory. And I look at currently my role at Razorpay as the place where I have what I would say is a scale part of my journey in my product management career. I really hope that I don't come to a mature phase. Hopefully by that time I might be doing something else. But let's hope I can go ahead and talk about the first 3 phases. Once I've gone through the maturity phase, I'll probably be talking about that in some time in future. So yeah, with that, let's talk about these 3 different phases. But before I do that, anyone has any questions so far?
Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can drop them in the chat as well, and I can direct them to Prasun.
Yeah, I would love to. By the way, this has to be an interactive session, folks. If you really want to learn, then I would really expect you to ask questions to me. And I know sometimes it becomes a little bit, hey, my slide looks, okay. Can you see the slide clearly? Yes.
Yeah.
Can you see all the 3 descriptions, or do you see only 2 icons here?
Just the 2, Prasun.
Yeah.
Actually. But now you see all the 3, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll keep it in this space. I don't know what's wrong. Anyways, so let's talk about start phase. A lot of you, as part of my earlier discussions with the PM school, are thinking are in the early phase of your product career, or might be thinking about product management as a career. Now, as you're thinking of starting into product management, what is that you must optimize for? What is that you should look for? And just sharing from my experience and talking to a lot of PMs now and how they are moving forward in their career, it's really important to focus on getting mentorship at a product-led org early in your career. What does that mean? Mentorship is different from coaching. You take mentorship from someone where their experience is fairly relevant for what you're doing. And hence, I feel mentorship, although can happen outside of work as well, but product management is a career where you learn a lot on the job. And there it really is great if you can actually optimize by looking out for a role in a company which has a decent product management practice already in place, where there are enough good product management managers around with whom you can have a general interaction, or you can see how they do their work, how they write their product specs, how they do their solutioning. And that essentially is key for a successful product management career, at least in the like a short to mid term. Next, what I would really want you to optimize for as you are looking for your early product management choices is to focus on learning. Now, the learning is key because as a young product manager, you're expected to be a fast learner, and you're, of course, expected to focus on performance. A lot of product managers who come in, if they have different roles and they're comparing, look for roles where you would get a lot of learning. And also ask for hiring managers, what is their expectation? What is that you want me to do? How would you rate my performance after a year or after 6 months? That in a starting part of a product manager's career becomes really important. And it's almost like if you miss any one of these, it hurts you later in your journey. It's almost kind of expected in a lot of companies where I have worked, as well as I've interacted with other PMs, that when you join early, you're expected to be a fast learner, and you're expected that you will come in and meet your goals. And when I look at my journey, I find my startup and my role at Quikr to be very similar to that. Especially when I moved from my startup to Quikr, I got a lot of mentorship. And the mentorship was also from senior PMs who were there, and in fact, even other peers whose work I could closely see. I could get them to review my specs, and I could basically collaborate with them. And that is how essentially I kind of felt that I was really set on a path where I had a lot of things in my control and in my experience, which helped me to add value in my career for the products where I was working. Now, as you move from and we'll talk maybe about how do you know if you're moving from this phase to the next phase, but as you move, once you've gone through this phase of learning and as you move along, there would be a phase where you want to grow, where you want to essentially amplify your impact. And that's essentially what I call is a growth phase of your product management career. Now here, a lot of successful careers which I have seen, what has really started happening is you can make bets, and in your career you would be able to make 2-3 bets, and hopefully one of those 2-3 bets would be really, really great for you. So what you should look for as you're making a transition into another role at another company, try and bet on growth at a fast growing startup. Now, example could be somebody who's, let's say, working at Razorpay or at Gojek, and they had just grown through the early phase of their product management career here. They could maybe look for a Series A, Series B company where they can go in and really add value, and also grow, because the company is going to grow very fast. They also grow along with that. Now, what's key here in this role? The key is amplifying your impact. Now, as an individual contributor PM in the starting phase of your career, you are essentially focusing on learning. But here, as you move in, you're focusing on how do I amplify my impact. Now, how do you amplify your impact? One of the most straightforward ways is to have more and more people and more teams contributing towards the goal which you have. Now, how does that happen? Either you have built your team, you have other PMs reporting to you, you are interacting with other stakeholders in marketing, you're interacting with other stakeholders in terms of maybe they are your partners, merchants, etc. And you are essentially optimizing. You're not a single PM working and working hard and creating impact. You have essentially been able to get a group of 10, 20, 30 people aligned on the goal which you're driving for the company, and that is helping you amplify your impact. Now, in terms of what should be the focus in this phase of your career, and I'll talk about it on this slide, is exposure. There is a separate slide later on exposure where we will go deep. But just to share with you, when I joined Gojek, I don't think I had like everything which I wanted, but there were few things which were extremely clear. Here is a company where you have transport, food delivery, mobile payments, and 20 other services. So in one go, you get exposure to 20 different businesses, 20 different industries. Here's a company which is not working in India. So I'm getting exposure to another geography. And then eventually they expanded in 3, 4 other countries in Southeast Asia. So that was another exposure which I essentially got. And that was phenomenal. And because I was working in Gojek across for more than 4 years, and across these 4 years, I had 3 different stints. And I started with a platform role in data engineering team. And then I moved to growth, and then I had additional charter on monetization. And as that happened, the company also grew 20x, more than 20x in its transactions, in its users, in its merchants, drivers. And all of that really helped me learn a lot of things. And I also saw a lot of growth coming into my charter, reportees, the impact which I was able to create for the company. And that's how essentially, like I really don't want to say, because there are a lot of people who are phenomenally more successful. This is just what I think I went through as a journey, and my career's growth phase was this 4 years plus, which I spent at Gojek. From here, I moved to Razorpay an year back, where I essentially consider this as the scale phase, where you have ownership of a larger charter at a decently sized startup. The key for your success is your organizational skills and strategy, and you're no more at a place where you're hiring teams, building teams. You are actually defining at a much higher level how the org structure should be, how hiring should be done, how appraisals should be done, how OKRs should be driven, and you are essentially bringing in a much wider impact. And what is really key is your org skills, strategy. And by the way, there are a few skills which are important in any phase, something like a communication skills, your written and verbal skills, etc. And what your focus has to be, and I'm still going through this journey, so bear with me, I'm making few projections, but in my opinion, the focus has to be on influence. How do you increase your influence? And that is where essentially you need to influence the OKRs the company is taking overall, or how much budget allocation we are doing towards newer initiatives, or what new bets as a company we are taking. And all of those are areas in which you try and influence. So I'll try and summarize on this slide. So we talked about three phases: start, growth, scale. We talked about in the beginning of your product management career, focus on getting mentorship at a product-led org. The key is learning, and your focus is to be on performance. In the growth phase, bet on growth at a fast-growing startups. Take and be easy on you. You will make bets. Few of those bets may fail, but continue to make bets. The whole tech industry actually I find it's very liberating, and a lot of companies like invite you with open arms. As long as you've gone through this first phase, you are a fast learner, you're known for your performance. Amplify impact, optimize for exposure, and lastly, like optimizing for owning up a larger charter. The key being organizational skills, overall strategy, and focusing on increasing your influence and making it key to driving business success for the company where you are. So what I'll do is, let me take a pause. Maybe I can call a couple of people as well. Uh, let's take a pause here, and let's get some questions from people. Anyone
Right.
wants to share from their experience where they feel this framework or journey uh, gives them any insights, or do you find some conflict, or do you see that yes, this makes sense? Would love to know your thoughts or face your questions.
I think
Yes, ma'am.
when I look back at my analytics career, it's also fairly similar. Wherein the kind of skill sets that somebody with, let's say, 2 to 3 years of experience would need to build initially on versus somebody from, let's say, 4 to 6 and then, let's say, 7+, that kind of follows through similar framework that you had shared. So it's very relatable that way. And also it helps us kind of understand, like, coach and when we hire for our teams. I think I had one question for you
Yes.
that I had is, like, how do you identify and know that when you move from one stage to other, and like, you mentioned that you need to take a certain bets,
Yes.
especially when you're going from, let's say, the growth to the next stage and so on.
Right.
But what are the, let's say, the key things that you would look for?
Right. So let's talk about, like, let's say, moving from start to growth phase, right? So if you feel that your learning has tapered now, and you're like, despite your best efforts, the impact which you're creating is only, let's say, whatever x or whatever 2x or 3x, it's not going beyond that, and and you feel that you're ready for leading other people and managing them directly. All of these are like very clear indicators that you're ready in your career to move to the next phase, where you can take some risks because you've been in a product led, or you've got good mentorship, or at least you've focused on learning, and you can get things delivered, you can get things done. So you can actually take risks. You can go to other places, younger, untested places, who might have a lot of growth in front of them. So that in my head is how you know that you're ready for the growth phase. Moving from growth phase to scale phase is kind of you're eager for creating a lot more impact for the company, and you kind of feel that you can actually contribute a lot more in the company strategy overall, and not just talking about like your product strategy. And you can really help the company where you're going with how they hire, how they attract talent, what their policies are, and not just like in terms of process, but in terms of like being more successful as a startup. Maybe like that's how kind of you can feel that yes, this is my time to move into the next phase.
Got it. That makes sense. Thanks for taking it.
I can take maybe one more question.
We have one question, Prasun, from Hiranya. He's asked, how do we distinguish ourselves in terms of performance? For example, how did you stand out in Quikr? What are the metrics? What are the ways to measure performance?
All right. So, hi, Hiranya.
Hello.
Thanks for asking the question. So, performance is, these days, it's becoming increasingly simpler because most of the tech orgs are moving to an OKR model, right? And if your company doesn't have OKRs, I would still suggest that you talk to your manager and also manager's manager, because really your promotion, etc., in a lot of ways not determined by your manager, but your manager's manager. And make sure that it's very clear with them. Ask them, what are your expectations from me 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line? What would I do? Then I would have exceeded your expectations, and what if I do, I would have met your expectations. Make it very clear. And I think those, OKRs are like objectives and key results. So it's like goals and how do you measure those goals? And those should be fairly straightforward. And the expectations, like, I don't know if how you look at most of the leaders, the expectations they have from their early product managers is that you would focus on delivering whatever has been assigned to you, come what may, and you would raise your hand if you feel that there are hurdles. So we're looking for someone who can learn fast, because you would have not done that. Most of the cases you might be a new PM, or you might not have worked on that kind of product or domain, so you need to be very fast learner. And your OKRs should be fairly straightforward. These are OKRs you can meet or beat, and those are the most straightforward ways in which you can create impact. Now, if your question was more specific to Quikr, when I go back and look at my Quikr experience, there were a few clear instances which I was responsible for. For example, mobile apps, user engagement was the second charter I was owning, and then the third was data products. And each of these three, I had discussions with the founder and my manager where there were expectations, and I was able to, in 2 out of these 3 charters, I was able to beat their expectations and have status quo or meet their expectations on one of the charters. So that's how I knew that I was performing as per their expectations, or mostly be slightly better than what they were expecting from these charters. We didn't have OKRs back then, but those were, and that, right? If you're doing good, people come and tell you, or people come and tell your manager. So it should, and there's a next framework which I'll talk about shortly. It should be very clear that you're known for performance, or you're known for fast learner. Cool. If there's no other question, I'll then move back to my deck. But folks, feel free to ask question. There's a lot more I could share, and it's been a couple of years I've been into product management. So if there's any other aspect where you feel there could be some learning for you, more than welcome. So the other framework which I've been using a lot in defining how to make career related decisions, or how to really even choose your next role or company or assignment. It could be within the same company, it could be into like a new role. And obviously, like these days, I believe 2 to 3 years is broadly on average maybe what your stint is in a company. I have some point of views on that as well, how long a stint should be in which phase. But essentially, this is a framework which I first saw in a very different company. It's called Procter & Gamble, P&G. P&G is, I think, like more than 100 years old. The brands P&G owns are like Gillette, Head and Shoulders, Pantene, Pampers, Whispers, Tide, Ariel. So these are the brands, Vicks, which P&G owns. And this was a career growth framework in P&G. And I spent 3.5 years in P&G in different roles, which was used there: performance, image, and exposure. And essentially, for you to consistently grow in your career, you need to move forward on all these 3 axes. So I'll talk about it. I have separate slides on each of these 3. And do ask your questions if you have any, right, on any stage. So what does performance really mean? And somebody even asked this question. Not somebody, Hiranya asked this question. So Hiranya, here are 3 other areas where you can essentially, look at and measure your performance. So one area is clearly, how your scope has been increasing, which means your charter, the team size, the budget, which is there. All of those are indicators of what your performance is, how much you're adding to your company's success and other growth metrics. How are you doing on these key skills in product management: tech, data, design, research, communication? Like, are you like really known for, being tech savvy, doing great solutioning, writing great PRDs, and on top of that, having, great communication skills? Your updates are brief, succinct, to the point, visual, and, whenever you update frequently and you have new interesting things to talk about. and an impact, like, how many users your products or your initiatives has enabled us to acquire or engage, additional GMV or transactions or profit you have brought in. So these are axes on which you can clearly measure your performance and how your performance has been. And that's my framework. When I have looked at different roles, I have looked at them from a perspective of scope. Would I get to learn something new in terms of skills, and what is the impact I will be creating? These are very objective numbers, and it's no secret. A lot of PMs here would tell you that whenever they get a recruiter call, within the first 15 minutes they get asked questions around, how many people have you managed, what is your charter, and like, or for example, how many users you have handled, what scale have you handled, or they're like 10 million users on your app or like 50 million. I don't know, like, if anybody wants to add anything there, what else they've been asked when a recruiter calls you. Anyone wants to share? Or the question which I just said, does it make sense? Have you been asked those questions?
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. The first thing is how many people report to you, and then around the scale, for sure. These are the two major sort of asks for any interview you get into, these days.
Right. Cool. So moving on to the second vertex of this triangle, which is image, which is what I called as the brand which you build for yourself, right? Internally or externally. It's very, very important to build a brand for you. And again, to evaluate the opportunities you have in terms of, will this help you create a personal brand for yourself? Content and recognition, which is, how have you, like, written blog articles? Have you been creating content on maybe other platforms like Twitter, or maybe even YouTube, whatever the platform it is, but like, it's relevant for product management. If somebody, like, whenever I am trying to hire senior product managers or senior product leaders, what I do is I looked at their profile, then I go to their LinkedIn, I look for in their profile the links to their blogs, or have they written any articles on LinkedIn, and I read them, because that gives me far more than an interview, a clear idea of how this person communicates, how this person thinks, what has been their experience, if they've been talking about few of their key specific product related challenges. And that is a far better indicator of the experience and their success and their communication skills than in a lot of ways an interview may not be able to even cover. Recognition is, it's difficult. Like, there are multiple different things in which a recognition come in. Your paper has been selected somewhere, you've been recognized by some group as maybe, whatever. Like, so recognition can also come in. It's very handy, really helps, especially early in your career. But essentially, the way you look at it is how you're known as. What are you known for? And one, like, I don't know if it's very well known for us, but if you do not know, as you move higher and higher in your career trajectory, reference checks, what people actually talk about you directly from the people you give as my reference checks versus blind reference check, where the recruiter will reach out to other people who would have worked with you in the past, and they would actually check on. And this is not just a check in terms of have you worked, how many years you've worked, have you worked at this level. They would actually check, are you a good product manager? Are you good at communication? Can you handle conflict? How are you as a manager? And those are really, really critical for you to move. You might actually apply, and a lot of times you might see that, I did not get an offer, or I got dropped because your reference checks might not have come out as so. So building that brand, building that image, like, if you have a very public brand where you put your thought out, where you put yourself out there, it's very difficult. People can already have 10 signals to know that, yes, you're good, or, this is what you're known for. You're known for product strategy, or you're known for, someone who's well connected, or who's worked on, let's say, growth phase of different products. So it's become difficult for somebody to go against work which you can demonstrate, or thought process you can demonstrate, and which otherwise, depends on what few people might really talk about as a ref check for you. I see there are some chat messages.
Yeah. Yes, Prasun. In fact, I have one question
Yeah.
which Vaibhav has reached out to me directly. This is around the image
Yes.
management, building the image itself.
Correct.
So he says, I have spent a couple of years in product management domain, and because of some factors, the kind of companies worked with or learnings within the company, there hasn't the learnings hasn't been significant, and it has been slow. Now, if I want to switch to another organization where I expect to learn more, but these organizations now rate me on my current projects or my past experience,
Sure.
which is not quite demonstrable. How do I come out of this situation? How do I rebuild my brand?
Yeah, so your brand is not just the projects you've worked on. Like I said, if you see in this image, I don't think I've actually mentioned the projects here. What I've mentioned more is, it's, when you are trying to grow a product, that product might have customer issues as well, or some other lack of features. But what really happens a lot of times is people try and get awareness as much as possible, and they try to build a certain brand. And that's what you can focus on. You can focus on your strengths. So it's okay. It's a long career. All of us can choose to have a 20, 30, 40-year long career. The way lifestyle is going, life expectancy is going, we can all expect to be fully functional, hopefully into your 70s, and you have a long career in front of you. So it really doesn't matter if your start phase is 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. What really matters is, what do you want to do, and how do you go? So on a specific question, maybe we can talk more specifically in your case separately. But building your image and your brand is in your hands. Like, are you writing? You created good content? Are you, putting down your thought process in written words? A lot of time I prefer a blog article over a video, because somebody has to actually think, put it into a structure, and then write it out. And that is way more efficient and effective. I can read that article in 5 minutes, which somebody might have distilled off their 2-3 years of experience and taken multiple hours to write it. And that's my preference to actually see. So so that's one. And then the other advice would obviously be, like, create a list of startups companies where you think you would have really high learning opportunity, and then make sure that you reach out to those places through references, through high quality references as much as possible. And if not, then, like, cold call is also okay, and you can figure out. So we can talk the specific case more separately. But I'll move from image to the last one, exposure. This is something which I have consistently used. Like I talked about Gojek. Even when I was looking at from Gojek to Razorpay, one of the things which really stuck with me was, with Quikr and with Gojek, I was in a B2C, a consumer company. And with Razorpay, I came into a B2B context. So that was different exposure. Definitely, there was something which I wanted to do. I had done a lot of, like, as a founder, innovation, product work, growth product work was a big part of what I had done, and obviously a lot of feature work. But what I had not done more specifically, other than the 9 months of data engineering experience at Gojek, was a lot of platform work as well, along with growth and partnerships, which is what is the other exposure which I got. So B2B, platform product work. And also in terms of domain, it's not just fintech. I realized that Razorpay is into payments also, banking also, and lending also. So now within fintech, I get exposure to 3 different domains by being at one place. So those have been very clear areas for me to optimize for. Does it help or not? I would let you folks decide. But however, when I look at my journey, I have found out that really helps me engage a lot more, because there's always a lot more to learn, to discover, and then grow. So talking about exposure, obviously, 4 different kind of product work, feature work, growth work, innovation work, platform work, and you do need exposure to all these different kinds of product work. There's no way you can be, let's say, a head of product without having worked in support, without having worked on growth or platform, or just, being able to ship out features. The next would be domain, like exposure purely about domain, how many different industries, different geographies, different even functions. Like now, I think you will start finding a lot of people who are career product management folks, but there is still a lot of folks who have come into product management from very different domains, me included. And that also really helps in terms of having different experience. But even within product management, you can, talk about e-commerce, you can talk about transport, you can talk about SaaS, you can talk about US customers, Indian customers, Southeast Asia customers, function would be different, like marketing, product, engineering, analytics, design. And lastly, exposure is also about, management exposure. Like, of course, having worked as ICs, have you managed individual contributors? Have you managed managers of individual contributors, or have you managed managers of managers? Have you managed cross-functional groups? And have you managed profit and loss? So these are other areas of exposure which you can go in, and all of these, I'll just summarize again. Performance, image, exposure becomes the pie, which has helped me make a lot of my career movement changes. So I had one, like, more or less like one charter in Quikr, but the charter significantly grew. In Gojek, I had 3 different roles: data engineering, growth, and then monetization charter got added. And then, of course, I changed in between. I changed from Quikr to Gojek and Gojek to Razorpay. All of these, as I was making these changes, I was mindful of what opportunities I have across these 3 axes, and how I might actually, get more exposure with. And as you can probably see, when I was at Gojek, I got to learn a lot more about how, so in my data engineering role, I got to learn a lot more about how product delivery is done, how agile product development is done, which is like approached very differently and very refreshingly different from how other companies operate. I learned in my growth phase, how do you use data? How do you run experiments? How do you basically use data to make decisions? And then with monetization coming in, how do you use research? One of the best research teams I've seen in the industry is in Gojek, and I really kind of was able to build a research-led product development roadmap. So all of these really helped me continue to focus on performance. While doing all of this, I got some really great opportunities to be able to build some kind of a personal brand. I think it's not that it has helped, but in terms of content, I was able to take a cohort-based course on product growth a few months back. There have been a few recognitions here and there. And then, of course, I've been not as much as I would want. It's probably one of the opportunity areas for me, but definitely content is something which I can probably do a lot more of, but I've done some content. Exposure wise, product work, I've been able to do all 4 domains. I've gotten a lot of experience. Thailand, Vietnam, a lot of exposure as Thailand, Vietnam, mainly Indonesia and India. So these have been the geographies. Function wise, because I've worked in different companies in different roles, not just product management, that has also been something which has helped. Different tech stacks exposure I've had, and obviously stages. I've done my startup, so not unfunded, pre-seed, seed, series A, pre-unicorn, unicorn, decacorn, like all of those different stages I've been able to see. And then, of course, like, I think one of the areas where I'm actively probably still looking for is some kind of an P&L responsibility. But as you start to get into P&L responsibility, not a lot of product roles are there which give you that. A lot of gaming companies do that. But that's where the lines between business role or product roles start to get a little blurry. but again, it's a good exposure to have. So I think, yeah, so just summarizing, simple PI acronym, performance, image, exposure. And I hope you would be able to, focus on making your choices using maybe your own framework, and just, looking at this as how one of your fellow product manager made his decisions, going through his journey. There was some talk about how do you know you're moving from start to growth to scale phase. And I think I did kind of address that already. So what I'll do is, with this, I realize that we have very less time left. So I'll end this, and I would request for questions. Let's do open-ended questions, if any. I think we have around 10 minutes or maybe 8 minutes.
Yes, Prasun, we have about 10 minutes. We could probably start with the questions in the chat.
Sure.
Most of which I think you've already covered in principle. But how do we, Hiranya has also asked, how do we start with content creation as someone without a background in PM? It seems like a number of them do have Insta handles where they share their journey, etc.
Sorry, Insta journey?
Right. So
okay. I
Instagram.
got it.
Yeah.
Instagram. No. Okay. Okay. So one of the problems with ephemeral content is it's not there after you've created it. Same thing with something like your Clubhouse or Twitter places. It's great to do that, but that content is not amplifying your presence. So I do prefer investing time in content platforms where I can actually put in the hard work once, but then it's there for people to see later on as well. But I'm not sure if I fully understood the question. So somebody, the person who asked the question,
I guess I wasn't specific. I just looked at stories, but I guess what I meant was like an Insta page where like they're working in a company and in a product role and they share their journey. So it just happens that maybe I'm following like product related hashtags. So I see more and more of these people who are in product roles who are sharing the journey, but they're already in it. They're already in a PM role. So I was just wondering, as someone, as some of us are entering this field without background, how do we, go forward? And I also received some suggestions, but I would like to hear what you have to share, please.
Right. So a lot of people have asked me this question, how to break into product management. And you will hear different answers from different people, but I'll give you what my answer is. I firmly believe that anyone can be a product manager. It's a role where you have to be a lot more present, a lot more aware of the user, of technology trends, of what is the change which is happening, and how good you can communicate. And these are things, if you care enough and if you focus on, you cannot be very far. So I strongly believe anyone can be a product manager. And how to be a product manager is to be a product manager. And what I really mean is, I don't believe by going ahead and doing an MBA, you necessarily become a product manager. My strongest advice has been reach out to companies, if required, even take a salary hit, because the way opportunities are opening up, if you have product management experience, 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, there are a bunch of companies which are willing to hire you, as long as, yes, you're good with communications, you've invested in building your brands, you've learned quickly in that role. So if reach out to startups. There are so many startups these days who are still struggling to hire good people, who may not have the kind of funding which they need. But if you are clear, you are willing to go into a product management career where you get to learn and you want to perform for them and create huge impact for them, I think it's still easier, especially in countries like India. I know it's slightly difficult in US, and in Europe as well, where they specifically do look for previous experience. But these days, I feel that because of COVID, it's even easier these days to actually get into product management. But yes, what I really mean by that is that the hurdles are breaking, but the competition is high. So it's more like the entrance examination is becoming easier and easier, but the competition is going up. So whenever there's a role opening up, there are multiple hundreds of applications. I believe like we just opened a role yesterday, and I got like suddenly 90 100 applications, and that's where I think the kick. So again, like if you invested in building your image, then you can stand out very clearly. And if you've invested in being in places where or if you can do some networking and reach out to people, then you can get introductions or references or referrals, and that can help you break in. But I don't know if that helps, but that's what my point of view is. Everyone can be a PM, and if you want to be a PM, then be a PM. And if you take a salary cut within a year, you can easily more than make up for it.
Thanks for sharing.
We have one more question from Arya.
Yeah, let's take a question. I think there's one hand raised. Hey,
Yeah.
yes, go ahead.
Hey, Prasun, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm a very early PM, and something that you said was very interesting that I found. So in order to grow, you in your career, basically you need to have proper performance. You need to have a proper image and then exposure, right? I kind of agree on the performance and the exposure part, but I do not understand why an image is important. But as far as I understand, basically, I think what you're trying to say by personal brand is like what your thought process is. That's what that's how you build a personal brand, right? Like you try to put out your thought process to the public, and they try to understand how you think, basically. But isn't it more important what types of product you're building, how you're impacting, as compared to what your thought processes are? Because
It's not
sometimes.
Yes. Sorry, please finish your question.
So because sometimes I just think like what you learn or what you sometimes learn, you not apply everything into the product you're building, and the product that you're building is far more important than what different things you have learned apart from that. Like that's a very stupid question, maybe, but
No,
yeah.
okay. No, it's not a stupid question. Number one. Number two, it's not a question of this or that. I think performance comes first and foremost. You have to deliver on what you've been asked, and you have to focus on learning. But image or building a personal brand is also important, because it's an honest reality. There are a lot more product managers today than there were 5 years back, right?
Yes.
Which means you need to be able to stand out. So imagine, like for me, it's like you enter a supermarket, you have 20 different brands of a given product, and how do you stand out? And it's as simple as that. So if you want to grow, you also need to share your story. I'm not saying that you need to exclusively focus on brand building. That should not be the takeaway. But you need to look at opportunities which help you create your brand. Like for example, if you're looking at, like, I have so many different examples where people, just to share with you, whenever we are hiring for a role in product management at Razorpay, which involves other people reporting to you, we necessarily do ref check. We ask you for if you know anyone who can give a reference check for you, and then we will also reach out to a few other people, and we will try and figure out ref check. So it's now ref check. You don't have to write articles. You don't have to go somewhere. It just means that when the way you're working, the people you're working with, they really appreciate the impact you're creating for them, and they have good things to talk about you. That's image, right? You're not investing in, you're just working on your product and you're doing a good job.
Yes. Got it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, but standing out is still important. And given that you need your products also to stand out, it would not be a stretch to imagine that somebody who can sell himself or herself in a slightly better way can probably also do that with their product.
Rightly said, yes.
All right, we are at 9:31. Maybe you can take one last question.
Yeah, there's one question on the chat by Arya. What importance does your previous product type of experience get while pivoting to a different kind of product role? For example, will a candidate with 1 or 2 years of experience, exposure to a B2B SaaS product be, what do they need to keep in mind when they're pivoting to, say, a B2C product?
All right. Arya, may I ask you a question? Like, how many years of experience do you have? Is it an early stage question, given that the example you're talking about is only 1 or 2 years of exposure?
Yeah, I have 1 year's work ex. I graduated in 2020 itself.
Okay, great. So when we interview for early stage PMs, let's say, APM, PM1, PM2, I don't think we necessarily look at what experience you have. Yes, it becomes an important thing when you're looking for a more complicated domain. Let's say, it could be some complicated thing in fintech, in payments, because, there is a lot of other complications plus regulations, etc. Then yes, and I would be looking at hiring a senior person. I would definitely look for some domain expertise because I want the person to come in and, hit running. But what is the honest ground reality? We have roles and we are not able to hire people. We get hundreds of applications, but the conversions are extremely poor. And this has been, happening it has gone crazy in last 1 year as well. So that's where it is. Everybody would want the most perfect fit for their role. I have a role for a specific product. Yes, I would want somebody who's worked on that product, who's great in communication, great skills, etc., etc. But the honest reality is that's not what is the reality in the market. So then what I'm really trying to do is I'm actually, and a lot of companies by philosophy take away the domain expertise because we're not really looking you to solve this problem as a job. We are looking at you as a long-term career in this company, and we believe you can learn fast. If you're a fast learner, then you can learn about other things and solve those, and we can then give you other roles to you as you grow, because the domain in which you're starting, it may grow up to a only certain level, but another domain within the same company can actually help you grow to a much higher level. And those are the things which we consider. So as long as you've got your bases covered, I hardly think this would be a case. I think the caging thing becomes only applicable when you've been working on some very old tech and core in the domain. And most of the times the caging thing at least is more important to me when we look at, is the person someone who can learn fast? Is the person someone who can fit into the culture? Somebody who's only worked in blue chip, very big companies, Goldman Sachs, or okay, I just took a name, but may not be necessary. Some like very different kind of a company, and you have a startup which has a very different kind of a structure. That's where I think the caging discussion comes into hiring discussions, not a B2B SaaS product versus a B2C product. So I wouldn't consider in your case that to be a concern at all.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Sure.
Cool.
I think, Hari, your answer to your question is also same. You want to be a product manager, start applying, start reaching out, start writing, and like be willing to also reach out to early stage companies. Don't look for all the things, and even optimize for learning. Cool. I know we've taken 5 minutes extra. With this, I'll hand it back to you, Kushal.
Thank you, Prasun. Thanks for joining us for this talk. It's been quite insightful. I could relate a lot from your journey with my journey as well. And I think everyone, you've taken a lot of pointers on how to accelerate the path to become in your product manager journey or product manager role. Do reach out to us if you have further questions to Prasun. We will probably post them as questions on or as a post on LinkedIn. And do follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube for nuggets of wisdom from experts around the industry. And thanks again, Prasun.